Welcome to Fueling Your Legacy, hosted by Samuel Knickerbocker. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a new, stronger foundation essential in creating your legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. Welcome back to Fuel Your Legacy, and this week we are going to be talking about how to construct your personal story. It's super important, so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about building your story brand. That's the book we're going to review on Wednesday, how to create a moving story brand that makes sure it's consistent and people are aware of what your brand actually is and the story behind it, so that it creates that emotional connection. And then on Friday, we're going to have a good friend of mine, Les Patterson, talking. He's a military Army vet. He goes into a little bit of details about that, what it meant to serve in the military, and his passion for helping people overcome PTSD and change their personal story. So there's a lot to look forward to there. And then again on Wednesday, I want to just reiterate, for those of you who missed it last week, we're going to be doing a webinar, Fuel Your Legacy Blueprint webinar, to help people overcome some of the things that are holding them back from taking that next launch into their financial future, as well as just wrapping their mind around building a legacy of meaning generally and throughout the rest of their life, and hopefully multi-generationally. So if you want access to that webinar, there are 10 spots available. 2 have been taken, so we're winding down. Actually, by this point, I just looked, and there's actually 4 taken. So 4 people have taken those. There are only 6 spots left. You're definitely more than welcome to hop on and hopefully get one of those spots. If you don't get on soon enough and get one of those spots, then we will just I'll make you aware of the next one, and you will be first in line to go to the next one, which will be in 2 weeks after that. I believe the 31st of July. So with that being said, the way to get access to that is to text in 385-263-7699. Text the word webinar, all lowercase together. So text webinar to 385-263-7699. Awesome. So let's get started. And this is one of the things that I'm passionate about, is helping people construct a good personal story that's going to serve them. We all have different experiences in our lives. We all have different events. And based on what we take out of those events, we start constructing a story that we're going to tell ourselves. Every morning when we wake up, we tell ourselves a story. Sometimes that's a positive story, happy, we love our kids, we're excited to be with them. And sometimes it's maybe not so positive, and it's a negative one. Oh man, I'm so tired, I feel sluggish, my throat hurts. Right now, as I record this, I have a sore throat, and I can choose to allow that to be part of my story for today and for the future, or I can start telling myself, man, I'm healthier than ever. I've never felt better. I'm going to the gym. I'm getting out. I'm exercising. I'm making sure that my body's still moving, and I'm not going to let this change my life or the way I'm operating. And as I do that, as I intentionally create my story, my existence actually changes. Now, the question is, why does that happen? Why is the changing happening? And how to construct a story, what elements are important to create a story that's going to be impactful for yourself and that's going to actually rub off on others so that they can be part of it. I bring this up often, because I just can't think of a better story that was ever told. But Christ told a great personal story, whether he was the Messiah as he claimed or not, as millions of people claim. Right? It's irrelevant, because he told himself a story as a story he told himself. He lived up to, by all accounts, the story that he told himself. He performed all the actions, all the things that he believed he was capable of. That's what he did. And it was so convincing of a story. He was so convinced of a story that he was able to involve other people in that storytelling process. Other people who, in my opinion, told similar stories to themselves and accomplished a legacy of meaning by sharing that story with others, would be Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., all of the founding fathers, from the people who are most well-known, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Hancock, all of the most well-known ones, all the way down to the people who really nobody knows about, people from the southern states, a lot of them, Pierce Butler, just random people who don't really nobody talks about them, but they all have a story. Some people are better branded than others. And that's what's important here. Were there other people who probably believed themselves to be of royal birth, or to have an infinite purpose in this life? Absolutely. Some people just are better branded. Here's another case that I brought up in the past, and that is Mount Rushmore. Who created Mount Rushmore? And when you actually go and Google who created Mount Rushmore, what you're going to find is a man's name that you probably never heard of, just because he sucked at branding. He just never let anybody know who he was or what he was doing. And yet, when you look at what he actually accomplished, it was quite incredible. So just go to Google, type in who created, I already forgot his name, so I'm looking it up right now. Who created Mount Rushmore? Okay, so there were 3 separate architects there. There was, oh man, this is going to be, I'm going to butcher these people's names, but just go look it up yourself. There's Gutzon Borglum, there's Harold Spitznagel, and Lincoln Borglum. So it sounds like Lincoln and Gutzon Borglum, they were both brothers, and then Harold Spitznagel. But nobody knows who they are. I mean, I've never seen a movie about this person. I've never read a history about this person. They just were poorly branded people, and yet you have better branded people who have done far less impressive things than carving 4 people's faces on the side of a mountain. And so think about your own life, your own brand, and your own story that you're creating. One, are you intentionally creating your story, or is it just happening as you wake up and just unfolds, but you have no idea? I mean, that the perfect idea of that would be a movie, probably a scary movie or a horror film, right? You have no idea what's going to come around the corner. You haven't thought about it. You haven't pre-planned it. And every day, every minute, every week, every month, every year is happening the same. It just keeps unfolding. But you're like, hey, when is this going to end? What does the end look like? Where am I headed, right? So many people are asking themselves these questions, and they're looking for the answer inside of somebody else. They're waiting for somebody else to tell them, hey, where's this going to end? What's the end of my story? Where am I headed? And unfortunately, they never realize that end is up to you. That idea of creating your own story, that's up to you. Nobody can give you that answer. Generally, what happens is when people do give you that answer, you reject it. You're like, I don't want that answer. I don't want to put in the work. I don't want to go through the whole movie to figure out and get to that point. And so you reject somebody else's answer for where your life could end up. And then you just sit there and wallow in your self-pity that you aren't ending up where somebody else is ending up. It's like that person who has everything. They've got the house, they've got the car, they've got the family, they've got the faith, they've got the fitness. All these people, they have intentionally created what they want. They've focused on it. They've figured out what they need to do to get it. And then they've consistently put in the effort, the action, the mentality work to achieve what they want. And then you sit there and you say, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go in that work, and I don't know if that's what I want. Well, as long as you're sitting in indecision, you're going to be kind of just floating, bobbing through life without any focus. But don't be upset that somebody else has something that you want just because they've decided that that's what they want and you haven't decided it yet. And that is one of the biggest and most important things when it comes to intentionally creating your life. I'm super, super excited for this week. This book, Creating Your Own Story Brand, is a life-changing book. I mean, every book that I read, I'm like, man, this just changed my life, because I'm sitting here looking for how can I better myself? How can I learn and grow? How can I become more? How can I be more intentional, more focused, more driven, more happy in my life, right? There's sometimes where I get a little bit down on myself, but that's all part of my story. And so for me, I have to start changing my story and be a lot more intentional with my story. And as I do that, man, the world around me changes, and I change, which thus in turn, in relation to the world around me, there's changes. And it's just a wonderful experience of growth and happiness and gratitude as I begin to achieve those things that I have intentionally created into my story. And some things you can't change. I mean, there's people, probably the most notable person that I could bring up right now is Viktor Frankl. He was stuck in a Nazi prison, almost died multiple times. And somehow when you read Man's Search for Meaning, the book that he wrote about it, you're almost like wishing that you were there with him going through the same experience, because the story he told himself was so incredibly positive about this experience that it just doesn't even seem bad. Yes, he's talking about how people are dying next to him, how he's having to step over people, how he's getting stepped on, how you can see his ribs, how he's getting beat. He's talking about all these things, but the way he's saying them, from the mindset and the perspective that he's saying them, is so positive, because he's just constantly focused on all the things he's learning and keeping agency inside of himself and choosing his future in the next step, that it almost just, it just doesn't seem that bad. And so it's just so fascinating that no matter how bad and how dire your situation might be, and I promise you, I'm not being ignorant of the fact that you're probably struggling with some form of depression, anxiety. You're probably struggling with money issues. You're probably struggling with health issues, right? I'm not ignorant to the fact that you have a life and that you're struggling, because I know what my life is like, right? We all have lives. We all have things going on in our lives. The question is, what story are you willing to tell yourself about those issues, right? The other day, I was out golfing with my wife, and we got, I wouldn't say in an altercation. I was trying to help, and from my perspective, okay, so just be clear what story is being told. My perspective, I'm trying to help her remain calm so she can hit better shots, right? From her perspective, she was getting frustrated, and me telling her to remain calm was connecting to a bunch of negative associations from her past, and it just was like we were miscommunicating in a big way, right? And once that became clear, I honestly didn't know how to respond, and so I just didn't say anything. Well, as the day progressed, and when we finally got to talk about it, that was the worst way I could have responded, apparently. Well, I didn't know that. I was in that specific situation, I didn't know how I should act, so I just acted how I felt was right with myself. Well, after talking about it, now I have a way that she has let me know, hey, this is the better way for you to respond. Perfect. Now I can intentionally create that way of responding into my story, so that next time something like that happens, next situation, I've now changed my story. I've created exactly how I'm going to respond before I have to respond, right? I don't often get caught in situations where I don't know how to respond, but occasionally I do. And when I do, I don't know if I'd say a freeze, but I definitely go introspective, and I start thinking, okay, well, how would I want to be responded to? What's the best way to respond? And that's my process of doing that. I would encourage each of you to process, how are you intentionally creating your story? When you see things happen around you, just ask yourself, what is it about those situations that are helpful? I talked about this, I think, on a Facebook Live a few months ago, but so many people, they don't want to judge because they're worried about judging other people around them. When you are a story creator, when you're creating your own story, there's a ton of judgment happening, okay? The difference is there's not condemnation happening. So there's three forms of what I would consider judgment, or even, I don't even know how to call it judgment. It's just like, it's all there. They're all synonyms. Okay? Condemnation, judgment, and assessment. They all can be synonyms if you don't know what you're talking about, I would say. But this is the way I separate them to keep things clear in my head. So if I'm assessing a situation, assessment is observation, pure observation, just taking in information. Judgment comes in when now I've taken in this information and I have to make a judgment call. I have to make a choice. I have to decide how I'm going to respond based on what I've assessed, what I've observed. Okay. Now, the question is, with that decision, how much emotion is involved, number one, and I think that emotion is good to get involved in judgment calls. The question is about the emotion. Is it condemnation emotion? Are you condemning somebody else and saying, wow, that person's bad and wrong for doing whatever I observed them do, and I'm judging them for it? Or am I judging the situation and saying, well, I don't want to participate in those activities, or I don't want to show up in the world that way? Because I'm seeing them show up that way, I'm assessing how it plays out, and then based on that assessment, I'm going to make a judgment call and say, in my life, that's not how I want to show up. So then I'm going to start to create my story and kind of like bend my story into fit the narrative that I want it to fit. Now, some people call that brainwashing, and I agree. It's absolutely brainwashing. It's called positive brainwashing, and we should all take part in it daily, whether it's religiously, fitness-wise, health-wise, business-wise, family-wise. You should always be continually brainwashing yourself to become the best version of yourself that you can possibly imagine. And that is the intro, okay? The intro to the week of creating your own story. I am so excited for you guys to get to hear from Les Patterson this weekend, because it's amazing what he's been able to accomplish, the things he's been through, and how he's come, how far he's come, and what he's done to get there. And then most importantly, how he helps other people get to where they want to go. So that being said, again, on Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, there are 6 spots left, 10 people total will be in this webinar and be invited to this webinar. You'll get a link once you get registered. If you'd like to get registered for that webinar, then you need to text the number 385-263. Yes, 385-263-7699. And that is, it's going to be just a life-changing experience, and give you a lot of insight onto how could you start creating a story that's going to help you accomplish the legacy that you actually want to have. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. We're going to go over some limiting beliefs that have held people back in the past, and how to overcome them, how to start today becoming and creating the life that you want to live. We'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy. Thanks for joining us today. If what you heard resonated with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me so I can give you a shout out on the next episode. And thanks to all those who have left a review. It helps spread the message of what it really takes to build a legacy that lasts. Catch you next time on Fueling Your Legacy.